Hi guys, it's James again, back with another video. Got a stockpile of lists going, which is good. Not running out of ideas. So, out of the few that I had finalized as of today, because there's a couple other lists where I want to rewatch some of the films on them because it's been a long time since I watched them. There's another list where there's a couple movies that I either didn't watch all of or didn't watch at all, and they might make the list, so they're not going just yet. So this one is my top 10 supernatural films. Now these ones usually involve some sort of ghost or supernatural entity, good or evil, something otherworldly. So we will start with number 10. Number 10 is a film called Mortal. And this one is from last year, from 2020. And this is the latest film by Andre Overdahl, and this the guy who directed Troll Hunter and The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and right before this he did Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the horror movie based on the what was it? It was a kid's book or young adult book, I guess. Anyway, all good, all great movies. This one is a good movie. It's interesting because it stars Nat Wolff, and it involves Norse mythology. So you get this guy played by Nat Wolff, Eric, and he sort of is moving around on his own, like camping on his own and moving across the country. He's in Norway, and he has this strange affliction or ability where if his emotions get too strong, bad things happen, like the weather gets really bad, or he seems to have this ability to control electricity. And he's even accosted by some teens, and he tells the guy straight up, it's like, if you touch me, you're going to die. And the guy just thinks it's bullshit and grabs him, and then like all of a sudden it just like keels over dead, as if electrocuted or something. And he gets arrested, and he's being treated by this doctor who's trying to understand what's wrong with him. And it turns out he's had this ability as long as he can remember, and his family, his farmhouse, they lived at a farmhouse, his family one day just all died in a fire. Well, it turns out it was his emotions that got too strong and called down some electricity and just roasted the whole place, and he was the only one who survived. I suppose it's not much of a... I mean, it's a spoiler to reveal, I suppose, his background, but I thought Nat Wolff's performance was good enough that just watching the movie was good, and saying it deals with Norse mythology and he can control electricity, you kind of get the feeling like, oh, well, maybe it has something to do with Thor. Well, apparently Thor had left this certain farmhouse to his children, and this kid Eric is possibly a descendant of Thor, which would explain where he got these abilities from. You don't know anything about his family except that they died, but he has the ability to control the weather and electricity and all that stuff. So there's stuff that happens at the end which I won't get into, but that's essentially the explanation behind his powers. But it's what he does with them and what happens throughout the film that I won't reveal, that you want to experience. So that was Mortal. I think I heard that it was coming out, and I wasn't sure about it, but I like Nat Wolff as an actor, and I found out it was Andre Overdahl. I'm like, oh wow, well I'm definitely going to check this one out. Guy has a great track record, and I liked it. All right, number 9. Number 9, we have a film. If this wants to load, come on. Film called Seventh Moon. And, oh, come on. This was a horror movie from a few years ago, as soon as it comes up, under the Ghost House banner, the series of horror movies produced by Sam Raimi. And there we go, Seventh Moon. Produced by Sam Raimi. This came out in 2008, and it was written and directed by Eduardo Sanchez, who was one of the filmmakers who made Blair Witch Project. Now they made that one together, and then they went off. Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez went off and made their own films after the massive worldwide success of Blair Witch. And this one stars Amy Smart and who's her husband, Tim Chu. And Amy Smart is probably the only one you'd recognize in the film. Excuse me. And so an American woman marries a Chinese guy, and they go back to, they go back to China to celebrate, they're newlyweds. They go to China to celebrate their honeymoon. And they happen to arrive right in the middle of this, they call it the Hungry Ghost Festival. It's sort of like a local Halloween where supposedly the dead roam among the living. And in this case, it turns out to be true, and they start getting chased and terrorized by these really pale, ghost-like looking humanoid figures. And most of the locals have boarded up their house and put I think dead animals or something, or some sacrifice outside their door to appease them so that they don't drag away the village's children. And so they're being pursued by these, you see, monsters, I guess, ghostly entities that are trying to take them back to the underworld. And they're not getting any help from the villagers because the villagers are like, well, we need to protect ourselves, take these guys. And I had this one for years without watching it because I wanted to check out all the Ghost House films and the After Dark films and Dimension Extreme films. I still haven't made my way through all of them, but when I finally checked this one out, I liked the story they told, and I liked the mythology they set up. And it's another one that has a great, I'd say, cathartic ending. Not entirely a downer, but the journey through the movie towards the end is great. And I thought Amy Smart and Tim Chu did a great job. Both of them equally in this movie. Okay, so that was Seventh Moon. All right, number 8. Okay. Number 8, we have a film from 2003. It's a New Zealand film called, New Zealand horror film called The Locals. I remember I picked this one up used just on a whim, I think, and this one was interesting and has a great but not entirely original twist, which I won't spoil. You get two guys, let's see, Grant and Paul. They hit the road. It says they hit the road for a weekend of surfing, booze, and hopefully girls. Well, they end up driving along. They meet up with a couple of girls that they're going to go towards this outdoor party, and they end up crossing this bridge and wiping out and going off the road. And they're trying to get help. Let me see, just... Yeah. Someone gets injured in the crash, so they're trying to get help from the locals. And as they soon discover, they're in a place that's kind of on the evil side, and the locals aren't very friendly. So they're on the run from the locals, trying to figure out what the hell is going on wherever they are. And the two guys that played Grant and Paul, let me see, it's Dwayne Cameron and Paul Glover. I hadn't recognized anybody in this film. Just a bunch of New Zealand actors that I'd never seen before. But I thought this one was well done, and I like the twist. I like the rest of the movie too, but I like the twist. The twist also makes sense. It doesn't cheapen anything. Once you get to it. So that is The Locals. All right. So number 7. We get a film from 2011. It's another New Zealand horror film, coincidentally, called The Devil's Rock. And this one takes place during World War II, and it's on the eve of D-Day. And it takes place at a military base on an island in the Channel Islands, off the coast of England, where I've been. And you get two guys. It is Captain Ben Grogan and Sergeant Joe Taine, and they are played by Craig Hall and Matthew Sunderland. No, Craig Hall and Carlos Drinkwater. Craig Hall I had seen in a film before. What exactly he had done escapes me, but he's the one guy in the film that I recognized. Anyone else, not so much. But you've got New Zealand actors and German actors and stuff like that. And the two guys, they come upon this Nazi base, and it appears abandoned. So they're going down, and this one's cool because you got going down into these dark military tunnels, like this big, huge bunker. And they find like blood all over the place and bodies and stuff. And they go into this one room, and this one Nazi colonel comes up behind and kills Grogan's friend. And he explains to him that he's been hearing this woman's scream the whole time they've been going through the tunnels, and he wants to find this woman who's obviously in trouble and help her. And the Nazi is telling him that no, it's not really a woman. Someone here read this evil satanic book and conjured a demon that can't leave the island because it can't cross water. But he has it chained up, and it can appear as a desirable woman to entice any guy who comes by. It can be like their lost love or teen love or dead wife or whatever it takes to entice them in. And the demon has slaughtered all these soldiers. And so the Nazi colonel is telling him, like, he's trying to figure out a way to banish it. Well, as it turns out, he's not trying to banish it. He's trying to control it. So you got this battle of wills between the soldier and the Nazi colonel, who also still wants, because the thing is appearing as his dead wife, so he wants to help her. But at some point, she reveals her true self, and like a lot of makeup and prosthetics put on her, but it looks really impressive. So you're wondering who's going to come out on top, the soldier, the Nazi colonel, or the demon. And it's sort of, most of the movie, it's pretty much these three principal actors. And the woman / demon is played by Gina Varela as Helena / the demon, and Matthew Sunderland, who I mistakenly said earlier, plays Colonel Klaus Meyer. And another case of, for a movie that I'd never heard of and just grabbed on a whim, it was pretty impressive. The cinematography, the set design was really great, the bunker they used. So, that was The Devil's Rock. Number 6, we have a film from 2012 called The Apparition. This was one of the last films produced under the Warner Brothers Dark Castle banner when they were doing all the horror remakes and updated horror movies like House on Haunted Hill, 13 Ghosts, Ghost Ship, Gothica, and then they started branching off into other movies like Getaway, the Ethan Hawke car chase movie, and Rock and Rolla even. So they started branching off into non-horror movies, but this was one of the last ones because this one got delayed for a couple years because Warner Brothers severed their ties with Dark Castle and the company went under, and then a couple years later they dumped this into theaters, but in a very, very low limited release. So I remember seeing previews for this and another one called The Possession. It was like a demon possession movie with Jeffrey Dean Morgan. And that one came out. I remember seeing that one in the theater, but The Apparition didn't. Well, at least not anywhere near us. And so I picked up this one when it came out on DVD. And this one had a good cast. I ended up liking this one a lot more than The Possession. This one had Ashley Greene of Twilight fame, Sebastian Stan, Winter Soldier, Tom Felton, Draco Malfoy, and Juliana Guil from Friday the 13th, the remake. And those are the most recognizable actors in the movie. There's a few other ones. But essentially, it's these college students getting together and they're trying this experiment that was tried years ago called the Charles Experiment, where a psychological experiment where they try to conjure a supernatural entity. And it didn't work years ago. And then these college students get together and they attempt it, and one of the girls, I guess it's successful, but this girl, there's something goes wrong and she gets sucked literally into the wall. You see her fly up and like kind of get sucked through the wall, and she's gone. And so they separate, and like Sebastian Stan and Ashley Greene are off living their lives, and Tom Felton's off doing his thing, and apparently they recreated the experiment again. And Sebastian Stan gets like 36 missed calls from him saying like, blah, 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 I need to talk to you. The experiment happened again. Something was containment failed and you're in danger. Because Sebastian Stan and Ashley Greene are living in their house and they notice like certain things are like, you get this stain on the ceiling and it looks like mold and it's spreading. And weird things start to happen with their dog and stuff, and it's almost like their house is infected. But it's not their house, it's the supernatural entity trying to come through and terrorize them, try and bring them into their world, or come into their world and get rid of them. So it's sort of, it's kind of like with Insidious, where the house wasn't haunted, the kid was haunted. Well, this is sort of like the supernatural entity is latched on the people who were involved in this experiment and is trying to suck them into their world. And then you get them meeting back up with Tom Felton in his house, and he's got like this Faraday cage, like where he's trying to shield out all outside electrical or supernatural impulses or forces. And he's explaining the whole thing to them and what went wrong and stuff and what they can do to try and stop it. But I thought the effects were impressive and I liked the acting and the story. So I thought this one deserved better than it got. So that was The Apparition. Number five, we have film from 2006, a horror movie called The Gravedancers. And this one is one of the After Dark films. And I've seen this one a few times, and this one is pretty cool. It stars Dominic Purcell, Claire Kramer, Josie Moran, Tchéky Karyo, he was Fouché, the bad guy in Bad Boys and Kiss of the Dragon. And you've got... let me see, it's Claire Kramer, Dominic Purcell, no, Well, it says Marcus Thomas, Josie Moran, and Dominic Purcell, 3 friends that are mourning the loss of one of their recent school time friends died in a car accident, and they decide to sort of like have a wake for them and go hanging out, partying in a graveyard. Great idea. They're drinking and dancing around, and one of them reads this weird inscription on a headstone, and they're all dancing around on all these graves. And then strange things start happening, and they start getting haunted and terrorized by these ghostly monsters, evil entities. And there's these sort of ghost hunters led by Tcheki Cario, and they run to them. They end up encountering them and seeking help. And Tcheki Cario says he wants to know which graves they specifically were dancing on, and they find out, and it turns out that the inscription they read and the graves they were dancing on were 3 of the most terrifying, horrible, murderous people in the world. So there's 3 there weren't 3 worse graves they could have been dancing on. And so these 3 murderous spirits are coming back to kill them, essentially. So they have to find a way to put things right. And then you get the rest of the movie. And Claire Kramer's in there. I guess she wasn't one of the main 3, but I guess she's one of their tangential friends. So that was The Gravedancers. Some great effects in that one. Great creature effects. Okay, so number 4, we have a film from a French film from 2004 called House of Voices, or in French, Saint Ange. And this was the first film from Pascal Laugier. And he was the guy who did Martyrs, which is my personal favorite horror movie of all time, and The Tall Man. He's got a 4th film, which I have yet to check out. But with track record like his, worth checking out for sure. This one stars Virginie Ledoyen, who I've seen in a few films, but no other actors I really recognize. It was a French-Romanian production, so they're either French or Romanian, I suppose. But it's led by Virginie Ledoyen. And she plays Anna Jurin, and she ends up at, it says in 1958, she ends up at this not a hospital, isolated orphanage, it says. And there's only 2 people left in there. There's an adult orphan and a caretaker. And she ends up there and finding out that it was a place where refugees from World War II, kids and stuff, were sent there, but none of them really survived because of the lack of supplies and food and medical supplies, I suppose. And while she's there, she ends up encountering all these ghostly children who aren't supposed to be there, aren't supposed to exist, and everyone thinks she's crazy. But you don't. That's a question until that the movie will answer. You watch the rest of the movie. And as a debut film from him, I thought this was pretty great, pretty creepy, and a really interesting ending. Very well done. But great acting by everyone, and a great set piece, like this big huge orphanage that they filmed in. I don't know if they said where it actually was. They don't. Okay. Anyway, so that was House of Voices. Number three, we have a film from 2016 called The Forest. And this was one of 2 movies made about the legendary suicide forest in Japan, the base of Mount Fuji. It is let me see, it's Aokigahara Forest, and it's known as the Suicide Forest or the Sea of and the Sea of Trees. And it's known as the Suicide Forest because several people have gone there to commit suicide, and it's reportedly haunted. And Gus Van Sant made more of like a dramatic film with Matthew McConaughey, which will appear on another list. But this was who directed this one? Jason Zada. And this was the definitely horror take on it. It stars Natalie Dormer and Taylor Kinney. And Natalie Dormer heads to Japan to investigate the disappearance of her twin sister. Spoiler, also played by Natalie Dormer. And she had been living in Japan and went to the Suicide Forest and then disappeared. So she's there looking for her. And so, predictably, she goes there into the Suicide Forest, and a bunch of weird stuff starts to happen. You've got like creepy Japanese ghosts coming after her, but it also starts to mess with her head. Like it's projecting things that aren't really there, and she's doing stuff and they realize that she's been doing something else the whole time, which gets definitely creepy towards the end. And I thought it was really cool, and I like the movies both equally, but for very different reasons, because they are very different movies. They take place in the same location, and there's some element shared by both movies, not just the location, but some elements, story elements, or plot elements, I suppose, that are shared by both movies, but they're very different, but equally good. So that is The Forest. Let me see. Number 2, we have a film from 2008 called Passengers. Not to be confused with the Chris Pratt, Jennifer Lawrence sci-fi epic. This is more of a supernatural mystery thriller. And this one stars Anne Hathaway, Patrick Wilson, let me see, you've got Clea Duvall, Andre Braugher, David Morse, Diane Wiest. Those are the main actors you would recognize. Anne Hathaway plays a psychiatrist, and she's counseling 5 survivors of a plane crash. And one of the ones David Morse and Patrick Wilson are two of the main ones she's counseling, and Patrick Wilson is the one that she forms a bond or the strongest connection with. But as she's counseling all the 5 of them, they begin to disappear. So the mystery is, why are they disappearing, and what weird stuff is going on that these 5 people, the survivors, are now disappearing one by one. And there is a supernatural element to it, which I won't say, but it's the reason it's on this list. And Patrick Wilson, I think, everyone does a great acting job in this film, but I think Patrick Wilson was the standout. Anne Hathaway does a fine job, but Patrick Wilson, as one of the survivors, he plays it sort of like he's a survivor, but he's got this carefree, completely unbelievably carefree attitude about life now. And just his interactions with Anne Hathaway are just what make this movie so enjoyable. So that's Passengers. And now we come to number 1. Number 1 is a film from 2006, and it's called The Return. And I had second thoughts because I thought for half a second that I might have included this on another list, but I don't think I did. And this one stars Sarah Michelle Gellar, Sam Shepard, and Peter O'Brien. And Peter O'Brien, I kept forgetting where I had seen him from, but he played He was, if you saw X-Men Origins Wolverine, when you see Logan as a little kid, it's the guy who plays his father, who may not actually be his father, but the guy who's playing his father. And he's in this film. Sarah Michelle Gellar, this was sort of like a follow-up to The Grudge, and it's made to look like a similar film, but it's really not. It's more of like a supernatural, a ghost story, murder mystery kind of thing. It almost could have been on my murder mystery list, but I held off, partially because I forgot, but also because I had already started this supernatural list. And sometimes it'll be like, this movie could fit on both of these lists, but it can't be on both because I don't like to repeat myself if I can help it. But she plays an American businesswoman, and she traveling businesswoman, and she's avoided her birthplace of Texas most of her life because she had emotional problems when she was a kid and growing up, and her dad still lives in Texas, played by Sam Shepard. And so her business ends up taking her back through Texas, and she reconnects with her father and stuff. But she starts to experience visions of a murder that took place. Like she's being pursued and stuff like that, but it's all visions, stuff that took place like 15 years ago. Was it 15 years ago? I think it was like 15, 20 years ago or something. And it turns out that a woman was murdered by this killer, and she's starting to see visions of. She's starting to see through this dead woman's eyes. She's seeing what this woman saw and experienced, and so she almost takes it upon herself to solve this mystery, and she ends up coming into contact with the man played by Patrick O'Brien, who is the widower. His wife was the one who was murdered, so she ends up getting in touch with him by chance, and they end up sort of forming a bond, a relationship, sort of consoling each other, and wondering why there's this connection between the two of them, why she's seen his wife's murder constantly, and they have to get down to the bottom of like what's going on and why this is happening, and that's the mystery of the film. All right, so I was glad to get this one out for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. And I look forward to the next one. And yeah, I hope you do too. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Toodles.